Members' Order of the Day number 2.
Bill, second reading.
Nikki Wagner.
I move that the Conservation Natural Heritage Protection Bill be now read a second time. Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure to represent Jackie Dean, who is overseas at an IPU conference, and have the second reading of her bill. And she starts by saying, I extend my thanks to my colleagues of the Local Government and Environment Committee who willingly applied their minds and provided useful insights to enhance this bill. This bill has had wide-ranging support across the parties, and it's been a pleasure to work so constructively on issues that we all seem to agree on. We all care about our special places, plants and animals, and we all want to ensure that they are protected. From the Alps to the ocean, my electorate, that's the Waitaki electorate, has a diverse range of precious ecosystems. Valuable productive land, the vast Mackenzie country, our awe-inspiring Southern Alps and our special coast. My electorate is a special place filled with special people who value hard work and the environment. It is home to a range of special critters, plants and places. Rare and precious geckos have been smuggled from my electorate to supply an international black market trade in rare and endangered species. TVNZ's Sunday programme broadcast the story of the damage being done to the species and the shady methods used by these smugglers. My constituents are concerned, and so am I. We are not willing to stand by and let our natural heritage disappear simply for the gratification of a small number of international collectors. I will outline more of my reasons for sponsoring this bill in my speech for the third reading, but tonight I will concentrate on explaining the key changes recommended by the Select Committee. I'm asking members across the House to support this bill. It is in our national interest to do so. The bill provides solutions to problems that transcend party politics. The protection of one of the cornerstones of New Zealand and of us as Kiwis, our natural heritage. The Select Committee recommendations were made unanimously. I'd like to inform the House of the key changes we have recommended. The bill will result in a comprehensive, consistent and effective penalty regime across conservation legislation. The current provisions are inconsistent and are purely accidents of history. A person felling a magnificent original growth totara tree today would face maximum penalties of $500 if the totara happened to be growing on a reserve, $2,500 or 3 months imprisonment if it was taken from a national park, and $10,000 or 12 months imprisonment if it was felled on land held under the Conservation Act. This bill amends those inconsistencies. The bill, as introduced, applies to the Conservation Act, the National Parks Act, Reserves Act, Wildlife Act, and the Wild Animal Control Act. These are the key pieces of legislation that govern land-based conservation. During the Select Committee, we considered whether it should also apply to other conservation legislation and determined that marine mammals, that's dolphins, whales, seals, should also have the benefit of higher levels of protection. The committee recommended that the bill incorporate the Marine Mammals Protection Act, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Labour, Marianne Street, for her promotion of that amendment. Having consistent penalty levels across the legislation will ensure that like values are accorded the same degree of protection. The bill does not incorporate the Marine Reserves Act or the Trade in Endangered Species Act. While both pieces are key pieces of conservation legislation, the committee was advised that changes being made to the Marine Reserves Act through a separate legislative process. We will also advise that the existing penalty levels in the Ties Act are higher than the standard conservation penalties, and that changes to that Act should be considered carefully to ensure consistency with our international obligations under the Convention on Trade in Endangered Species. The recommended penalty levels will deter potential offenders from carrying out illegal activity, result in similar offending facing similar consequences, be consistent with other relevant legislation, be consistent with international best practice, and provide serious consequences for serious offending against our natural heritage. In order to achieve these objectives, the new penalty levels are a maximum of 5 years imprisonment or $300,000 fine, or both, for offending that is commercially motivated. For serious offending that is not commercially motivated, a maximum of 2 years imprisonment or a fine of $100,000, or both, for individuals, and a maximum $200,000 fine for corporations. For less serious offending that is not commercially motivated, a maximum of 1 year imprisonment or a fine of $100,000, or both, for individuals, a maximum $200,000 fine for corporations. For breaches of regulations or bylaws, a maximum fine of $5,000 generally, or $10,000 in some specific cases. These penalty levels are broadly consistent with the Resource Management Act, the Fisheries Act, and the Animal Welfare Act. I want to stress that these penalties are the maximum penalties. This level of penalty could only be applied in the most serious offending situations, and only where there are absolutely no mitigating factors or circumstances that warrant a lighter penalty being given. Our job in Parliament is to set the highest level of penalty that is a particular type of offending could face. We do not set minimum penalties or average penalties. We set the upper boundary and provide the courts with the flexibility to design an appropriate sentence within that boundary. Courts are bound by the Sentencing Act and case law to develop an effective sentence by taking into consideration the seriousness of the particular offence that has been committed, the circumstances of that offending, included aggravating or mitigating factors, and the circumstances of the offender. I acknowledge that a lot of conservation offending may be of lower range of seriousness. However, we are determined to provide the courts with a suitable upward level to ensure that serious offending is treated seriously by the court. We have seen too many examples in recent times where penalty levels may be insufficient to reflect the seriousness of the offending that happens. The new higher penalty levels will provide courts with broader parameters for sentencing, which will have most effect for serious offending. It also increases flexibility for providing broader sentencing options by providing for community work as an alternative sentence. New penalties with an option for imprisonment also allow for sentences of prison or a fine or both. This provides the courts with maximum flexibility to determine what is fair and appropriate in any particular circumstances. What the bill does not do is that although it changes penalties, it does not change powers. Enforcement officers will not be able to act in any different ways as a result of this bill. The bill does not change offence provisions, other than some minor, purely technical amendments to existing offence provisions. There may be value in improving powers and offences across the conservation legislation as well. However, that is beyond the scope of this exercise. I am confident that the changes made to penalties through this bill will have a significant effect in increasing the protection of our protected species, places and species. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question is that the motion be agreed to. Honourable Ruth Dicey.
Mr Speaker, I'm very pleased to speak in support of this